Hello, and welcome to a new episode and a new season of the Burning Questions series by Fantasy Football Scout. In this series, Pras and I, Sonaldo, talk about the key hot topics for the week. It's been a minute. It's been a long summer off, and we're back for the new season. Cannot be more excited. Pras, how are you doing?
I'm very well, and I've been around, man. I've been doing videos with the other Andy. You tell me, how's your summer been?
It's been fantastic. I mean, I've had a lot of work on my hands, and FPL gets intense at times, so it was nice to sort of take the summer off. But I feel refreshed and really ready to go and get this season going. Also, very nervous because I do want to do well this season. So much to talk about today, Pros. How about yourself?
5 minutes in, you're already nervous. I mean, come on, it's fine. I mean, this is the fun part, man. I mean, you've had no disappointments. You're just tinkering. I love preseason, and look, this is the first season that we're starting burning questions from the beginning, so it'll be nice to sort of do the whole thing from game week 1. I think last year we started game week 8 or 9. So yeah, look forward to it.
Awesome. So for today, our agenda is wildcard windows. A little bit different, a little bit interesting, but something to really consider when you make your team. A little bit of a preseason observation thing. So we'll just kind of talk about some teams and players and burning questions. And then sort of two drafts that are very template, but sort of a different kind of template draft, I guess. Um, yeah, so very excited to be back. And also, guys, please do subscribe to the FF Scout channel. It really helps us get out there and sort of this is our first season, full season, so your support is much appreciated. So without further ado, let's get into it. Wow, I'm kind of nervous, Pros.
Don't worry, man. Don't worry. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Let me do the wildcard section. So look, if you're listening to this, if you're listening to Burning Questions for the first time, we are geeks. We like to geek out on FPL, and we sort of help you become better managers. That's the motto that we have. So we're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to give you actually more decisions and get you more confused than when you came in. So hopefully this is what the wildcard window bit will be. I was doing a lot of preseason content with Andy Mode, and I also listened to a lot of stuff. And there was a point where we looked at fixtures, and then everybody stopped doing that once the player prices came. And then it was only about template. What are the players? Who are the best mid-price mids? Who are the best premiums? So I sort of feel like we forgot about the fixtures. And my view always has been that we should have a base case plan for a wildcard. It doesn't mean that that's the one you stick to. It doesn't mean that that's the only way to play, but you can have a freestyle approach. But always sort of have in mind, if I was to wildcard in game week 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, what are the pros and cons? And we saw last year, for example, there were people who wildcarded in game week 4 or 5, and they kind of got a lot of Wolves players in their teams out of it. They did fine. They had to switch. But then people who wildcarded in game week 7 or 8, they were able to load up on the Chelsea wingbacks, on some of the City players, and they did much better. Now, obviously, that is a little bit of hindsight. But what I want to do is basically walk through these windows and talk about, if you were wildcarding then, what is the dilemmas that you have, and is that a window that potentially appeals to you? So
Perfect.
I think if we start with game week 3, and what we did was we looked at all the game weeks, obviously, and we've selected these because these are ones that have relevant swings. You could obviously go other weeks as well, but let's start with game week 3. So what appealed to me as a game week 3 window is basically like you have a 2-week free hit, and you start out with a 2-week free hit. You load up on Villa, Wolves, Newcastle, Liverpool, Leeds, Man United. So these are the best 5 teams that we've shown in the first column. And you basically avoid all the teams that are in the worst 5, and you fill them up around the Chelsea, some of the Man City and the Liverpool assets. And so what that does is, after game week 2, you will be able to jump on these long-term picks like Chelsea, Bournemouth, and then you fill it around with other players. And you could also think like Arsenal. Arsenal have a slightly tougher run in the first 2 game weeks, which is Leicester and Crystal Palace. After that, you have a beautiful run until game week 8. So this is what the game week 3 wildcard does. I'm not a fan, but some people are mavericks, and I've even seen people look at, for example, a bench boost in game week 1. Now, 11ify on Twitter is one big proponent of that idea. I had a chat with him, and he thinks actually a game week 2 wildcard would be better if you were bench boosting. We're not going to go into the details of all of that, but we wanted to sort of say that if you wanted to go there is an opportunity. You have like the Villa fullbacks, you have Trippier, you have some Man United assets interspersed with a freemium. And the freemium in this strategy works well because you could have a Salah, you could have a Haaland, and you could have a Kane. And then after game week 1, you turn your Kane into a KDB and a Kane, and you turn your Kane into a Haaland. So therefore, you have a freemium and a very good team, which you can exit out in game week 3.
Yep.
So that was one thought. Have you ever contemplated an early wildcard or almost like planning a 2-week free hit?
I think the meta strategy when it comes to Game Week 3 wildcard is that now that we basically divide our season into 2, and then within the 2 into a half, if you know what I mean, Pras.
Yep.
It allows you to sort of, because right now we're going with a template team. I have a Son team. I have a Haaland team. I have a Kane team. I have a 5 at the back team. I have all these drafts, and I rank which order of my draft is sort of kind of where I'm going to go. However, you still don't know, right? Like last season, Ben Rama, out the gate was flying. This season, Bay might be, out the gate flying. Like we really don't know. James, we have no idea if he's going to be amazing James or Chelsea are going to struggle. So it allows you to sort of assess the first 2 game weeks and then just jump on the hot assets straight away, and maybe that pays off in meta strategy wise. Also, if you really deep dive into this Game Week 3 wildcard, there's only Aston Villa that really appeals, because from Game Week 4 they have West Ham, Arsenal, Man City, Leicester, and not many other teams that really have a jump off sort of fixture swing. So I'm not so keen on this. However, I think it could pay off if you get the cards right.
I think this is the strategy if you wanted to go freemium. If you really wanted to sort of get a share of the pie of the Southampton game, you wanted to attack the Bournemouth game for Man City, and you wanted Salah. And so then, because this gives you these 5.0 midfield 5.0 defenders like the Trippier, Dean, Cash. You could have the Wolves guys. You have the Aston Villa, Bailey, for example. I think there's enough cheap players to sort of work around the freemium, and then you get out of all of that. And you also circumvent this issue of Chelsea versus Spurs. So a lot of people are sort of put off by James because he plays Spurs, or by Doherty because he plays Chelsea, or a Mount because he plays Spurs. So this would sort of solve it. Now, we're not going to present any case here which is a good or a bad case. I think those are the pros and cons. Of course, another one here is you get a lot of price rises, because early season, You'll see game week 2, game week 3, prices are massively volatile. So if you were on a wild card, you would sort of enjoy a lot of these early bandwagons, possibly even a double rise, even if you didn't want the player. And so that's something that you could look at, but not personally for me. And let's keep going.
Yep.
So
as we keep going, I have a question for you, Pras.
Yep.
How important is early price catches this season compared to normal seasons with the World Cup in between?
I think it's less. And it's less because you have 3 circuit breakers in the season, which is basically Wildcard 1, Game Week 16, and Wildcard 2. So the thing with that is you can keep resetting your team, and you have a lot of cheap players in the game this year. So if your team value was 1 million less, you could, instead of a Perisic, you go for a good 4.5 million defender. Instead of a James, you could go for a Trippier. So I think there's a lot of options this year where you don't necessarily need to stretch your budget. The budget could come into play if people are looking at a 3 premium structure in the second half of the season. But I think we'll come to when we discuss our drafts, because a lot of good teams have good fixtures, you will have long-term glue players. You're not going to sell Robertson in game week 2 just because you think that, Doherty is having a price rise. You will sort of stick it out with Robertson. So I think a more patient approach could work better this year, because the bandwagons may not be worth jumping onto, because your glue guys are still glue for a reason.
And just for the newer players into FPL, the reason why people are very keen, there's some managers that are really obsessed about price rises and price falls, whereas some managers are less into it. And one of the reasons why managers are into it is because of the fact that later in the season, whether you wild card or free hit, or you use one of your cards, it really helps get that, extra premium asset into your team. But as Pras mentioned, this season, he believes that it's going to be less important.
Yeah, and the other thing is early season until game week 4, which brings us nicely onto our next slide, which is the game week 5 wildcard. Until game week 4, there is no midweek games for the big teams. There's obviously Carabao Cup for the non-top 6 teams, but for the top 6 teams, they have no midweek games until game week 4. So that brings us to our next window, which is game week 5. You could say that I'm going to target a lot of these rotation-prone players like a Doherty, Perisic, some of the City mids, even a Haaland, you could argue, because before game week 4, you have, free midweek. So you sort of expect the players to continue playing. And then game week 5 is a midweek game week. Game week 6 comes right after that, 3 days later. And then you have Champions League starting. So you could say, I'm going to do an early wildcard, look at this window of 4. And in this window of 4, the teams with the best fixtures are Arsenal, Villa, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Wolves. And if you actually look at the Twitter template, it is Arsenal, Villa, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Wolves. The only team not here is City, and City are also number 6 on the ticker, so not number 5. So this is a good window, I think. And let me discuss the pros and cons here. You could use this window to get on Wolves players and then just get off them, because you don't need Wolves for a longer period. Wolves' good fixtures are only for the first 6 game weeks. So yes, we're only talking about Neto or maybe an 8 Nouri, but it's a window where you don't need to sort of worry about Wolves assets anymore. It's a window where you could jump on some of the other assets that no one is talking about, like Leicester and Crystal Palace. So from game week 5 to game week 16, Leicester are the second highest on the fixture ticker. Crystal Palace are the third highest, and also Chelsea. Chelsea have a fantastic run after game week 4. In fact, they are pretty much the team that you can back throughout the game week 16 window, because from game week 1 to 16, I know we will have a wildcard to break it up, but from 1 to 16, Chelsea are the team that are top of the ticker. The issue with the game week 4 wildcard is that look who are the 3 teams who are at the bottom of the fixture ticker. It's Spurs, Man United, and Arsenal. So the problem is, even if you will never not have any Arsenal players or Spurs players, or you may actually start to reduce. But why would you get off Arsenal when they have another block of 4 game weeks that are nice? Why would you get off a Perisic if you think they're looking, he's looking nailed? And maybe if you're on a Kane or a Son, they have excellent fixtures over the next 2. For example, they only play Man City and Liverpool much later in the fixture ticker. So that's my main issue. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this game week 5 wildcard. We'll have an early wildcard. What are your thoughts? I mean, would you sort of look at something like this as an early wildcard? And then what are your thoughts about Spurs and Arsenal and Man United being bottom 3 in the fixture ticker?
I think it is an early wild card. It is an earlier wild card. Granted, we're looking at 16 game weeks, I believe. The issue is that, as you mentioned, Arsenal are 20th according to this chart. But if you really look into the fixtures, they have spread out decent games. Everton, Brentford in 7 and 8. Leeds in 11, 13, 14, Southampton, Nottingham Forest. So it's not like they're bad, fixtures. They still have good fixtures. So the only thing I can think of in terms of hopping off these assets, it's you're trying to wildcard into the better, or like you might start with Martinelli and realize he's not the one, and you might want Saka, for example. So I guess that you could hop on to the better assets on those better teams, but as you mentioned, Pras, you're probably not going to jump off the Arsenal assets.
Yeah, and I think this wildcard window might be popular if the template breaks, right? There's a lot of high-owned players like Jesus, like Perisic, Haaland, Salah, the Liverpool guys. And so if something goes wrong, like Son and Kane both go mad, or basically Jesus blanks first 2 game weeks and Arsenal assets don't look as appealing, I think then this is the window where people will just say, okay, look, we got it wrong. The prices are dropping like a stone for my whole team. And so this is a window where people can keep in mind, but look what you're sort of getting into. So what you'll be doing in this window is you'll be reshuffling. You'll be probably going from Robertson to a Diaz or a Nunes. You will be basically going from a Haaland to a Foden or a Grealish or a double defense. You'll be going from a 2 premium to a 3 premium or something like that, if you see what I mean. We're not suggesting here that you'll sell Salah for Vardy just because they're top of the ticker. What we're suggesting is that you'll have to rejig the whole team, and who are the popular players will not be the popular players in Game Week 4 wildcard. So I'll leave it there. It's not my favorite window because of the biggest issue here, which is that the transfer window is still open. And well, two issues. Transfer window is still open and underlying data is not there yet. And I think you will see this with burning questions. We will rely less in the first few game weeks on data and more on the eye test, because everything is changing. Every week we're finding stuff out. Look at Community Shield. You're going to talk about what we found with how Robertson is playing, how Nunes impacts Diaz's a heat map where he plays when Nunes is on versus where Firmino is on. So it's things like that you will see, and that then feeds into the model. So models actually take longer to catch up, and in the initial weeks, the advantage is watching the games, kind of doing an analysis on your team and seeing what works better than just looking at shots in the box for the first game week, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. And by game week 4, I fear that we may not have that. So game week 5 wildcard is also potentially one where you actually pull the trigger, but you find out, like Wolves last year, that the data was there, but it was not clear enough, and I made a mistake, and I backed some teams that I shouldn't have.
Yeah. And just the point about transfer window not being finished. Leicester's up there from game week 5 to 16th, but it looks like Maddison might be possibly moving to Spurs as well. So there's a lot going on, and I'm reading the comments, and there's a lot of people asking me about my curtain Pras, as well as in my team reveal video. A lot of the comments are about this curtain. Literally, if I open it, it's just like my bedroom. But next week, I'll do a reveal and sort of decorate the background. I don't know what I'm going to put up yet, but I think it's time to get rid of this and upgrade the Burning Questions background moving forward.
All right, fair enough. Okay, let's go to the next window.
Yep.
Game week 6. So game week 6 is an appealing window simply because it's the post-transfer window wildcard. So once you've sort of have the dust settled on, have City bought a left back, has Maddison moved, have Newcastle done any business, because they're looking everywhere. They're looking at Bowen, they're looking at Maddison. Essentially, they made a 40 million bid, like you play Championship Manager and you have a transfer budget and you just bid the same amount on many players. So that's what Newcastle have been doing. And you'll see if, where Frankie de Jong goes, whether that's Chelsea or not. So there's so much things that can be in flux. And last season, we saw when Ronaldo and Lukaku came, it completely changed the picture, rightly or wrongly, but it did change the picture. So that's sort of what will happen by game week 6 wildcard. So for the people who don't know, the transfer window closes on the 1st of September, which falls between game week 5 and 6. The issue is game week 5 is a midweek game week. So you'll have only 3 or 4 days to then finalize your wildcard team, because game week 6 will come around very quickly on the weekend after that. So that's something to keep in mind. I think, again, this kind of wildcard will involve a shuffle. So this wildcard is not going to move. You're not going to be selling your Liverpool assets for your Bournemouth assets or Leicester assets. Again, we want to clarify that. But you'll be moving around the periphery. So you'll be moving outside of the players that did not do well, or you'll be reshuffling within the top 6 teams. So again, I go back to the whole Robertson instead of Diaz, or a Nunes instead of a Robertson. That's the sort of stuff that you'll be doing on this wildcard. Maybe backing a Grealish or an Alvarez who's looking good. So the teams to back, if you were to wildcard in this window, continue to be Leicester. Bournemouth look very good from this point on. So a Solanke, if they're looking good. Newcastle look really good, because Newcastle would have played the 2 tricky fixtures that we've talked about, which is Man City and Liverpool. They play that in game week 3 and game week 5. So once that is out of the way and you're seeing signs, Newcastle is a team to back because nobody else is on them. Here, the bottom team is again Arsenal. Spurs is 16, Liverpool is 17. But I think, look, if you see Liverpool at 17, that does not mean that you jump off them. It simply means that maybe consider 2 instead of 3 from Liverpool. And that's the sort of thinking. But Chelsea, again, are number 6 on the ticker if you were to wildcard in this window. One other thing that we've added is the biggest swings. So if you were to wildcard, you wouldn't only have a game week 6 to game week 16 horizon. You would also have a midterm or a short-term horizon of who are the teams to really back for the next few games. And that's where Bournemouth and Arsenal come into it. So you'd sort of still have some Arsenal players, but you would have to jump off them after game week 8, which we will talk about later.
Yep.
I still don't think by this point there will be enough underlying data. I think by 7 or 8 wildcard, that's when you start to see it. But any other comments on this one?
No, I was just going to say I'd rather keep my comments till 7, because 7 is when it starts to get more interesting.
Okay. So let's go to game week 7. Now, this is, again, when people sort of say, I'm going to look at a wildcard fairly early on, I have seen a lot of people say game week 7 wildcard. I hate this one the most. And this is why we're doing this exercise, where we're sort of highlighting things to people that they may not have considered. So who are the top in the ticker here? From game week 1 to 6, Wolves, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Brentford. So all teams that we're targeting on our wildcard now, or on our teams now. But from game week 7 to 16, you have Bournemouth, Villa, West Ham, Crystal Palace, Leicester. Nothing wrong with that. The main issue I have is all the teams, the top teams, play each other in the next 2 game weeks. So you have essentially City playing Spurs in game week 7, Liverpool playing Chelsea in game week 8. So what you'll have is you'll be in a dilemma. Should I have the City players against Spurs? Should I back a Kane or a Son against City? But then after another game week, Liverpool will play Chelsea. So this will almost muck up your thinking in terms of the premiums, in terms of the assets that you should have from the teams that are the best teams. And this is seen if you look at the top teams from game week 7 to game week 16. Spurs are 19th in the ticker, Liverpool are 17th, Man City are 14th, Man United 11th, Arsenal 15th, Chelsea 10th. Not one of them is in the top 10 for the fixture ticker. Again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying we don't have any of them, but you'll just hesitate because they're not the teams. And then you'll sort of start to muck about with having Vardy, with a Maddison if he still stays, adding a Bowen, and your team will drift too far apart from backing the best team. So that's my worry with Game Week 7 wildcard, which is why I don't like it at all.
Yep.
The only pro I see is you can do some reshuffling. You can get on to West Ham. So if Bowen was really somebody who you wanted to back, this is the period where their fixtures got really, really good. Man United have a good short-term window here. So if you liked what you saw from Erik ten Hag, you sort of jump on Man United a little bit. But I sort of feel like it's going to mess up with your Spurs versus City and Liverpool versus Chelsea play.
Yeah, I think you perfectly summed it up. So there's a lot of sort of top 10-ish teams, maybe top 12-ish teams that have decent runs of fixtures. First being West Ham. They have Newcastle, Everton, Wolves, Fulham, and Southampton. So, we're very keen on Bowen, right? Bowen, proved to be a very, very valuable asset, even with the 0.5 rise. So he could come into the fold. As you mentioned, Aston Villa have pretty decent fixtures moving forward. But those are teams that we don't want to load up on, or we don't want to reshuffle, right? We just want one or two of the best assets that are going to be involved. So I do agree with you. And it's iffy because you go to the next week, Liverpool play Chelsea as well. So it's sort of, two game weeks where you're not really maximizing your best teams.
Yeah. And one other issue with this window is Arsenal, the team that is heavily backed, even tripled up on, they still have 2 games left, which are good. Right. So you'd rather sort of stick on them rather than jump off them. But then you have the issue that after 2 game weeks, again, you have to deal with your Arsenal assets because their hunt really goes bad after that.
And, just for the viewers who might not know, this is a list of best and worst is from the fixture ticker on FF Scout website. So definitely do check it out in the members area.
All right, lovely. Let's quickly go through Game Week 8. So Game Week 8 has similar issues to Game Week 7, so I won't spend too much time on it. The issues are still that Arsenal still have Brentford to play. You could potentially look to dead-end a City asset. So let's say if you had a Haaland who's playing, or you had a KDB who's playing Spurs. KDB is a big game player. Let's say if you have Kane and you wanted to switch him out, you could switch him out to a Vardy who plays Aston Villa at home just before wildcarding. So dead ending is always a good strategy. And I think if you were to wildcard in Game Week 8, that could be good. However, you would be stuck with your Arsenal players. You'd have to get rid of them because after Brentford, their run is bad. And Liverpool are not great after this either. So this is where you probably won't triple up on Liverpool, which is not a great thing. You could back Villa players who have a good run. You could back some Bournemouth players. I think Mitrovic starts to become very relevant after this window. But again, this is not my favorite window. 7 and 8 have similar issues. And the question in the chat is a very good one. Leo is good, has asked, when am I wildcarding then? And that's the next one, which we will come to, which is the Game Week 9 wildcard. If you switch to that, and I'll tell you, this is already a popular window, right? So this is not any revolutionary analysis. But what we're trying to tell you is if you wait it out till Game Week 9, then there are merits to it. And we'll talk about this chart in detail. But sometimes you'll feel in Game Week 3 or 4 that, my team needs a wild card. Maybe I should just play the wild card because I have a Game Week 16 unlimited transfers. A lot of people have mentioned this. We're looking for an early wild card. But I'm here to tell you that it would be worth waiting for Game Week 9. And these are the reasons why. You have on the ticker, the best 5 teams until Game Week 8. So Game Week 1 to Game Week 8 are Arsenal, Brighton, Man City, Brentford, and Leeds. But Liverpool are 6th, Chelsea are 7th, Spurs are 9th. So what it means is all the teams that you're backing on your Game Week 1 team, they're top 10 in the fixture ticker. In the case of Arsenal, they're number 1. What happens after game week 8? So game week 9 to 16, Arsenal are second bottom on the fixture ticker. And what that means is it's a simple switch from Arsenal to Leicester, because Leicester have an amazing run that starts from game week 9, which is Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Crystal Palace at home, Leeds at home. So you basically move your Jesus to a Vardy potentially. You move your Spurs defenders to Leicester defenders. If Leicester are doing well, obviously things can change as we evolve, but there's a very nice swing from Arsenal to Leicester. And then what also happens in this window is that you've gone through this turbulent period of City playing Spurs and Liverpool playing Chelsea. So you could potentially look to dead end your team and basically get off. For example, if you have James in your team, you don't want James playing against Liverpool, not necessarily. You could look to dead end him out and get somebody else who has a good fixture in that particular week. So that, plus the fact that you'll have 2 weeks to plan it, you will be able to look through the international break if there's any injuries.
Dead end James to game week 8, Pras?
You would basically not want him to play against Liverpool, right? You may not want to play him there. So you could have a potential option. Let's see who has a good fixture in game week 8 instead of James. I think Newcastle could be a good candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Newcastle play Bournemouth at home. James to Trippier just before your wildcard. So those are options that you can have, and you're basically trying to circumvent this fixture issue with game week 7 and 8, where all the top 4 teams play each other. And then you get out all your Arsenal players, and instead you fill in with Leicester, Fulham, some cheap enablers that may emerge by that time.
Yeah,
what do you think? Is that a window that appeals?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused on the James one, because starting game week 9, Chelsea's fixtures are pretty decent. So
yeah, you would get James back, so you dead end him.
Got you.
Get him out in game week 8 for Trippier, and then on wildcard you obviously target Chelsea. Yeah. Chelsea are number 5 on the fixture ticker.
Got you. Also, I think you missed the point about, or maybe not emphasized it, but Spurs going from game week 9 have really decent fixtures all the way to 16. So it might be a good chance to possibly switch up the premiums, or maybe that's the time you go for the double in Perisic and Doherty. I like the game week 9 fixture as well. It's just it seems like you're waiting quite a bit, whereas it sounds like everybody wants to sort of move fast. And there's some caveats here, right? Arsenal to Leicester. Leicester is no Arsenal, right? So it's a little bit iffy. For example, if Maddison moves on, you just never know how strong this team's going to be. I'm actually very worried about Leicester this season. So also, it's just sometimes when you're patient, you lose opportunities early on, especially the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th wild card. So strategically, maybe this seems great on the chart, and I do agree with you, Pras, about all your points, but it's about being not flexible but adaptable, because after a few game weeks, you might be realizing that oh crap, my team is so far behind the new template or the new meta, and missing out on many opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. You have to be flexible, adaptable, but when you look at your team today, and if it has triple Arsenal are top of the ticker first 8 game weeks, and they are bottom. So that basically tells you it's a good window. If you're looking at Liverpool, this sort of helps me decide whether I want Robertson or a Diaz. So if I'm looking at a 8 game week time horizon, Jota will definitely be back by then. Yeah. So I would rather back a Robertson for this 8 game weeks and then switch around later than go for a Diaz for people who are looking at an early wildcard. This is why we're talking about this stuff. Yeah. Another example is James. So James is somebody that people worry about because they play Spurs and they play Liverpool in this period in first 8 game weeks. So maybe avoid going for James initially and see how it works out with them. You don't have to, go on the Chelsea defenders immediately. Chelsea has amazing defensive fixtures after game week 9. So you could even have your Mendy, Chilwell, James, all of them after that game week. So these are the things that you'll need to keep in mind and sort of think about if you have a longer term horizon to a wildcard or a shorter term horizon.
Yeah, just remember Chelsea have amazing fixtures from game week 9 to 16. Okay, I have the game week 13 wildcard up, Pras.
So game week 13 wildcard is an interesting window. It's obviously very, very late. So you'll only go there if you have conviction that I've backed the best teams, my team is full of 9 or 10 players from the top 6 teams, I have no reason to switch, and you're happy with the players that you picked. This is very possible. Yes, last year the template really hit well, and if you continue if that pattern continues, then a late wildcard may appeal to people. So we're going to tell you why a Game Week 13 wildcard could make sense. So number one, on the fixture ticker, the teams to back, Chelsea is number one here. You have Arsenal at number 9. Man City, Liverpool are also middle of the table. So they're all decent teams that you have on your wildcard. But what happens is there's a phase that we've talked about, Game Week 7 to Game Week 12, where actually Liverpool have very bad fixtures or not amazing fixtures. So let me read out Liverpool's fixtures from Game Week 8, which is Chelsea away, Brighton at home, which is easy, fine. Arsenal away, Man City at home. During the same time, Spurs play Leicester at home, Arsenal away, Brighton away, Everton at home. So it's a window where you can basically play around with the concept of Salah out to a Son. And then in Game Week 13, you wildcard and you get Salah back, because Salah would have played your Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, and West Ham at home. And then from Game Week 13, his run is Nottingham Forest away, Leeds at home, Spurs away, and Southampton at home. So you sort of, in a semi-risk-free basis, get Salah out of your team and then get him back. You could do the same with Robertson and keep Trent, or all of them if you wanted. So this was what the main appeal was with Game Week 13, where you can switch around some of your Liverpool players for your Spurs players. I think the Man City boys, whoever you have, can stay.
Yep.
But that's the appeal of a Game Week 13 wildcard, because after Game Week 13, who are the top of the ticker? Liverpool, Man City, Everton, Crystal Palace, less so, and Bournemouth. So you basically back after Game Week 13, you have a 3-game week or a 4-game week window. You back the boys who you fancy. It could be Nunes, it could be Haaland, it could be Salah, it could be Foden. So basically really maximize those 4-game weeks in the end. So I'm not suggesting you sort of plan for 13 game weeks, but if you were there, think about Game Week 13. And if you think you're getting there, think about selling Salah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. Man City have good fixtures from 13 to 16. Liverpool too, Tottenham as well, Arsenal as well. So you could really maximize that and go for who you want. And I know you mentioned you could switch out Salah to Son during that 8 to, I think, 11 or 12 run. I guess you could do the opposite, where you can, wildcard earlier into Son and, have some flexibility where you can sort of bring Salah back after his run of tough fixtures. But obviously, wildcarding into Salah is a lot easier than the reverse way of thinking about it.
Correct. And the last bit on Game Week 13 is you would have, obviously, if you're reaching Game Week 13 without wildcarding, you would have switched out your Arsenal assets with using free transfers to maybe Leicester players, maybe Bournemouth, maybe Fulham. Leicester's good run ends in Game Week 13 as well. So it was a good window where you sort of, let's say you switched from an Arsenal to a Leicester, and then Game Week 13, you get all of those guys out, and then you switch to other teams that have good fixtures, like Palace or Bournemouth, who have good fixtures, as your enablers.
Okay.
All right. And then the last one, which is the
16.
the very interesting one. So let's say you've gone through the whole season and you the whole initial period, and you're happy with your team. There's no need to do anything. Well, you don't need a wildcard at all. You can just convert your wildcard into a free hit, because if you save it for the last game week, which is Game Week 16, you will have a game week where Man United are away to Fulham, Liverpool are home to Southampton, Man City are home to Brentford, Chelsea away to Newcastle. Okay, that's harder. But Spurs are home to Leeds. And they've done this because you remember that there was this ask by the FA that, the big teams don't play each other because they didn't want a feisty game leading into the World Cup. So what that has led into is a really, really exciting free hit game week. So if you wanted to sort of build your team around Liverpool, Man City, some enablers from Man United, I can't believe I'm saying Man United have enablers, but they're priced nicely. And Spurs, this is the week. You sort of convert your extra wild card into an extra free hit, and you just use it in the last game week.
Yeah, I mean, very unlikely many managers go here, but who knows? You might be, number one in the world for a while, like Focal, and sort of decide, hey, I'm gonna go for it this game week. So, if you get to this point where you're killing it and you're able to have a free hit basically with a wild card, then good on you, and should be a fun week.
Yeah. So I think even 13 and 16, that's not a planning wildcard window. That's a wildcard window that you reach by Game Week 7. You will think, okay, I'm doing fine. I don't need to wildcard in Game Week 9. Then you start thinking about selling Salah for a Game Week 13 wildcard, or you may want to keep it and stay longer. I think the windows really to think about as you go through this video later is what is the difference between a 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I think 9 is a clear standout And it would even mean for me personally that if I need a couple of hits in game week 4 or 5 to fix my team around, I would rather do that than play the early wildcard, which I've heard a lot of people sort of say that they might do.
Yep.
All right,
Okay.
so that's the geeky section.
Yep.
That's the section that, you know, we really wanted to discuss. I know right now everybody's thinking about whether they should have Perisic or Diaz or Robertson. So now let's do that. We're going to talk about the big teams.
Yep.
We're going to talk about what are the burning questions coming out of each team and some observations. So I think Andy's spent his time very nicely learning some tricks of some visuals. And we're going to discuss each of them in turns, and then we're going to discuss some burning questions that people have for each of these teams.
Yeah, and you know, fantastic summary, Pras. This is what you're so good at, and you know, you guys can sort of revisit this video and you know, stop by each section. I'll timestamp it after, and sort of just keep in mind that you know, planning is for to help you sort of actually visualize what you want to happen or what might happen. It obviously FPL doesn't work that way. You know, FPL just, you know, comes at you at 110% speed, and you just can't control some things. But it's good to have an idea of when you might want to wildcard and keep those things in mind before you start the season.
Yeah, and before you go to the next one, I just wanted to say, podcast listeners, this would have been difficult to follow because there was a lot of text on the tables. What I will tell you is I'm doing an article for Scout, which will be on Wildcard Window. So you'll see all these tables, all the pros and cons written out. I think it should be out tomorrow. So look for that and possibly read it and then listen to this if you're listening on the podcast.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to the first section, which is Spurs. Pras, I want to ask you, what are your burning questions in regards to Spurs?
There's lots, man. I'll start with defense because actually people are looking at the minutes that Perisic got and getting enticed by him. People are looking at the Doherty bandwagon and whether he is the one to back for a 5 million price point. There is then the question of Son Kane, Son versus Haaland. There's Kulusevski. So Spurs is all burning questions. So show us what you've got in terms of what they've changed in terms of now that Perisic was in the Roma game. Obviously, we're not saying that this is always how they will set up, but these are some early signs. And as I mentioned, we're going to rely on eye test a lot more early season. So take it from there.
Yeah, so basically, this is sort of, you know, just a one game breakdown, so it doesn't mean much, but I thought it was a good game to break down, which is the Roma game. The reason being the Roma game is the type of game that Conte struggles, especially struggled last season. And Mourinho, as you know, is a counter-attacking coach who likes to sit back and defend and make sure his wingbacks are playing back. You know, when Son was playing under Mourinho, he was the left wingback for a while. So this is what he does. He's good at locking out teams and then, you know, countering them. So Conte struggled, and this Roma test was a very good test because it was also, you know, sort of Champions League environment, right? You know, overseas, different country. So what I saw was sort of why I think Perisic is going to be a key member, and as a result, Doherty as well. But Doherty is more of a wait and watch. The comments that Conte made after the game was basically saying that, you know, they're both fit enough, but they're not fit enough, if you know what I mean. They're sort of getting back into rhythm. They have had long injury terms, especially Doherty. You know, he was finding his form and groove, and then very unfortunate injury towards the latter part of the season. And basically Conte is suggesting that they can play, but they're not playing at the level that he wants them to play at. So for me, it kind of convinces me that I can go for Perisic, because I do think that he's going to want to play Perisic early on. He's going to want to make him, you know, get some minutes before Champions League swings by, I think Gameweek 5. So that's kind of the reasoning I have. In this Roma game, I hope this visual is working, guys, but this is what happens with Spurs. When teams sit back, Spurs are unable to get the ball from the back to the mid to the front line. You know, you could also play the long ball, but, you know, you get caught here and there. So a lot of times you'll just see this pattern of play, right?
Not to interrupt you, but I don't think there's anything on the screen.
Oh, it doesn't work.
Can the chat tell us? Do you see any visuals on the screen?
This is not good.
Oh, now there is. Okay, I see it now.
Okay, you can see it.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Yes, we see it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, good. What do you guys see now? Do you guys see the random numbers in Kane, Son, and Perisic?
No, we can see the ball movement.
Okay, you can see the ball moving, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Correct.
Okay, cool. So this is sort of what the issue was, right? So when Perisic, this is one example. Perisic can pull out wide, Son goes high, and then number 8 is Sanchez. I don't think that's his actual number. Sorry. There's that white circle space that sort of opens up, right? So this is where the left center back is very important, and I'll kind of show you why this is important to Perisic. And then this is also a different type of pattern. When Lenglet came into the game, it changed because Sanchez, which is where Lenglet is right now, was unable to sort of, pass the ball and make those like sharp movements. And, with Lenglet, now this triangle of these 3 players is extremely, extremely important. And it helps Perisic, it helps Son, both left-footed, right-footed. And basically, a lot of disruption happened in the second half in this area. And this was the best sort of key that I saw in the second half. FPL is not so much about tactics. This is not a tactical lesson or a tactical thing. It's just what I saw in this game, and I'm trying to visualize it instead of just speaking about it.
But tell me something. If this, I think that the triangle. So this is Ben Davis was doing this, and he'll probably take over from Lenglet as well. If Perisic is in the team, what does it mean for Son? Is he more in the box? Or is Perisic the one going in the box and Son will maybe be less attacking without sort of insulting your boy?
Both, right? So one thing is that Son could pull out wide and, Perisic makes the run inside. Perisic could go out wide and Son, goes inside. Son can come in and receive the ball. Perisic makes the move behind. And on top of that, you have an extra asset in Ben Davis or Lenglet making the move. So it just confuses the defenders.
As well, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Which is crazy. Yeah, I mean, their chemistry will be really key, which is why goes back to the X minutes points before Chelsea. He'll definitely want Perisic to get a game to play on that side with Son.
Yeah, and double-footed is very sort of underrated asset because when you're double-footed, it really confuses the defender. I mean, football is played on grass essentially, right? And then when you're defending, you want to be able to sort of predict, like a Robin, for example. He's going to go left every time, but he's just so good at it. Whereas Son and Perisic both can go left and right. So it's kind of a good combination and a very unique combination because both of them are so good both-footed,
Yeah.
So anyways, that's sort of the visual I had on what I saw in this game. And as a result, I do think that Perisic is going to be a very valuable asset. And I did mention in the team reveal, and everybody knows this too, like he's so good with his left foot, so good at crossing. He's also very good at, making these sort of set piece header goals as well. So a very underrated asset. And so I think that I'm ready to jump on him because at 5.5, he's going to be extremely valuable if he starts kicking off.
Okay, so let's ask some burning questions on Spurs. Would you go Perisic over James? Let's say people, some people have an issue with 5 at the back, and while I don't particularly understand it, but it is what it is. They want to pick one because they have Cancelo, they have Robertson, they have Trent. So who would you pick, James or Perisic?
I think I would pick James. I think James is the safer pick, just because of minutes. Because I have James and I'm taking a risk on Perisic a little bit because I think he's going to get 65, 70 minutes. But Sessegnon is a pretty decent backup, a backup that at least Conte can trust. So it's just sort of a gamble in terms of, how ready he actually is, because we really don't know. So I would wait into sort of the press conferences. But if they were both fit, I would go Perisic for sure.
Well, they are both fit. The question is, where does James play? So James has a really good fixture against Everton with the Calvert-Lewin being out. So you can expect him to maybe get a clean sheet. And if he plays on the right wing, he can get anything. But then he plays Spurs. But then also Perisic plays Chelsea on the other hand. So it's really about that first fixture. Do you fancy a James versus... And then game week 3, you can obviously jump on and off either. But I'm a little torn on that one. I think going for a James initially is the safer pick, but Perisic is the explosive pick. So if you wanted to sort of get your 0.5 out, I think Perisic is safe for the first 3-4 game weeks. And in those 3-4 game weeks, he's playing Southampton at home, Nottingham Forest away, Wolves at home. And even the Chelsea game, I mean, it's fine. I mean, both will play 5 at the back potentially. So it's not, they may even cancel each other out. So it's not the worst fixture for defenders.
Yeah. Do you have Perisic in your team, Pras?
I have Perisic in my team and not James at the moment. Ooh. So that's we will come to it. But I may have Perisic and James, because for me, the biggest issue is I can't fit all the defenders I want. I mean, the people I'm scared of, even in a 5 of back at the back, are the defenders.
Yeah.
So let's move on to other Spurs issues. So tell me about Doherty.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of a Doherty bandwagon emerging. So I see him in a lot of teams. The 5 million price bracket is amazing, right? Even though they may not be in our teams now, I can guarantee you a lot of 5 million defenders are going to be bandwagons in the first 4 game weeks. I can think, again, from the top of my head, you've got Doherty, you've got Trippier, you've got Zinchenko, Gabriel, you've got Cucurella, especially if he moves to Chelsea. You've got Dean and Cash, you've got Walker. It's an amazing spot. So
Trippier as well.
Yeah, any one of these guys could become great. In Walker's case, glue guys, or in other cases like Trippier or Doherty, like explosive guys who can get a 15-pointer in any game week. So what are your thoughts on starting with Doherty?
Yeah. I don't think you would start with Doherty, but I think Doherty, maybe in the short term, maybe in the midterm, becomes a very, very viable asset and someone I'm very keen on, possibly even doubling up on Perisic and Doherty. You think about the Spurs wingbacks. On the right side, you have right now Spence, Royale, Doherty, and even Lucas Moura. But I think the Lucas Moura experiment is over. But basically, when you have Kulusevski on the right wing, he's so good. But there's only one problem with Kulu, which is his speed, right? So what Conte did to sort of make up for his lack of speed is, station him very wide and high. And there's nobody good enough to cross it from the right except Kulusevski, which is why he's so stationed wide. And let's say that you have guys like Spence and Royale. They can make the overlapping run because they're fast enough, which is why Royale was kept being tested by Conte. But he can't cross the ball to save his life, right? Doherty is not the best crosser, but he's a decent crosser. But remember last year, Pras, when Doherty was going off, where was he making those crosses and passes from? From like the center of the pitch, right? So Kulu's pushing out wide and he's making those inside runs. So he's essentially an inside wingback, sort of like Zinchenko at Arsenal. So I can imagine sort of Doherty Kulu kind of playing that role on the right, and Perisic and Son just burning everybody on the left. Richarlison, where does he come into play? He could start for any of them. Switches the way they play. He's very defensively active as well. And people think that he's just a substitute for Kulusevski or Son, but he could also easily substitute Kane. Kane needed that rest, and so he's the No, I'm not saying he's going to, rest Kane, but he's the ultimate, sort of, replacement because he's a starter level player. Essentially, I think that Doherty at 5.0 could become a huge steal in FPL. Yeah.
Okay, I hear you. Look, I'm less. So, firstly, shout out to the Wire boys yesterday. So, Pranal did a stream with James from Planet FPL, who's obviously the Spurs guru. And so he was saying on Doherty that he could be the one that sort of doesn't come on. So if Perisic doesn't start, he'll 100% come on. My fear with Doherty is we're already going with really cheap benches, right? I mean, that's my draft anyway. And I feel like I don't want to have this extra dilemma where I have a Doherty coming on. I could easily go for a Trippier to start off with for the first 2 game weeks, who has decent first 2 game weeks, and then decide who I want. Do I want the Doherty because he's looking like he's starting, or do I want to switch to a Walker because City haven't signed anybody, and so on and so forth for all the 5 million, or if Cucurella has moved? That's the first thought. The second thought is Perisic is a Conte signing. Doherty is not. So one thing I didn't like is he's still trying stuff. He was trying Lucas Moura on the right wing back. Now, if you were so satisfied with Doherty, you wouldn't really be trying out these things. So that sort of worries me a little bit as well. Now, it could be nothing. It could be just the fact that Richarlison will play more minutes on the right wing. He's trying to find a role for Lucas Moura. But it just sort of puts me off a little bit. But I have no doubt that there is explosive potential with Doherty. I mean, you saw what he did last season between game week 28 and game week 32, I think. Absolutely smashed it. So I don't hate it, but personally, I don't think it's a risk I will take.
I disagree with you, Pras. The fact that Perisic is a Conte signing, 100% agree with that. But Spence, for example, the comments Conte made was he's a club signing, not my signing. Fair.
Yeah.
But what other option do they have? They have Royal and Doherty. So who did Conte
Or
trust?
Lucas Moura.
Lucas Moura. Who did Conte trust the most last season, at least in the right wing back role, was Doherty. So regardless of it, being his signing, I do think that if he becomes starter, if he becomes part of that starting 11, it's his place to lose. Until we get there.
Fair enough. The question is if you go both. I mean, you can get really kind of with a thin bench, you go for both. One of them comes on, the other doesn't, and it's not pretty. So maybe it's me being risk averse, but that's where I am personally.
Yep, fair.
We'll do Haaland versus Kane when we come to our drafts, right? So let's leave that for later. There are some interesting game theories that we want to discuss on Haaland versus Kane.
Yep.
Do you want to move to the next team?
Yeah. We'll quickly do. Many people are aware of how Liverpool play, but I just wanted to highlight why I think I'm going to go Robbo over Diaz. And this pattern, basically Liverpool, we all know is a pressing team and one of the best pressing teams in the world. But last season, just to bring this up, Liverpool. So last season, this is available on FF Scout. Chances created from the left, 33%. Chances from the center, 29%. Chances created from the right, 38%. And before Salah got injured, it was above 40%. So a lot of their chances created and attacking come from the right. And when Salah got injured, you saw sort of a shift in movement where, Robbo became a very, very attacking asset and they started creating a lot from the left as well. And last season, prior to the African Cup of Nations, Liverpool had a total of 50 goals in the Premier League, in which Salah was involved in 48% of attacking returns. Not goals, but goals and assists. So very, very heavily involved in the attack. So basically, I wanted to highlight that, we all have Salah, we all have Trent, it's obvious, but a lot of their play goes through this three triangle: Henderson, Salah, and Trent. So to highlight this, what happens is there are ways in which they attack this trio. Sometimes Salah pulls out wide, Henderson makes a space in, and you always see Trent in this space sort of behind where he's left alone. Community Shield as well. He scored, if you remember, I think Thiago crossed it across and Salah received it and Trent was wide open and it was like a little deflection shot, but that's kind of where Trent kind of is always open. Same thing here where Salah cuts inside, Henderson goes wide, and Trent is always finding this space sort of right behind. And so what happens is that this space we saw, especially in the Community Shield, was Robbo's island and sort of where he was left alone. And a lot of times you'll see as the play is continuously zoned to the right and focus on the right, Salah 48% goal involvement. It leaves a lot of space on the left, and you'll see Trent sort of make that diagonal cross and make Robbo wide open. But in the Community Shield, I saw something a little bit different, where actually Robbo was even higher up than Diaz, and so I think the reason being is because it was Man City, where Man City are more attacking and sort of like to have the ball, and they're more adventurous, so that exploited a lot of space behind Diaz, but. Against the weaker teams, you'll see this pattern of play where they can't break down a defense, and you'll see Diaz cut it inside, and Robbo will always be open for this cross pass and hopefully crosses in. I just like the position that Robbo is in, and I just know how good of a player he is. Plus the clean sheets on top of that, it's such a safe and strong pick in my opinion. And Diaz, I just have a gut feeling that he's not going to be able to create these hauls, if you know what I mean. I feel like, Jota comes into the picture soon. This is very dangerous. I know I'm going to get a lot of slack for it, but it's just a gut feeling that I feel like I like Robbo more than Diaz.
Look, my perspective on Robbo versus Diaz is they're similar. In terms of expected value, if you look at any of the platforms, Review, Scout, They have similar expected value over the next 8 game weeks. It comes down to minutes and reliability. So I think for Robertson, and by the way, Robertson is also cheaper, 0.5 or 1 million, however you want to look at it in terms of structure. But you with Robertson, you have a glue guy for 8 game weeks, and you don't need to worry about it unless he's injured. With Diaz, you're constantly worrying about if Nunes plays, and this is again, we're basing it off just 30 minutes that Nunes got the other day. When Nunes plays, he was the one who was hogging up it was not a Firmino type play where he was the one who was doing all the dirty work and Diaz and Salah were doing the attacking. With Nunes, he'll be the one who's front, and Diaz could provide the width because Salah is not going to. So in that case, I worry about Diaz's potential. This is obviously based on 30 minutes, I repeat. Yeah. But I don't want to be worrying about that. And the second thing is Jota. Jota is far away right now from coming back, but far away means game week 4, game week 5. From game week 4, as we mentioned in the wildcard windows, midweek games come in thick and fast. Can I rely on a Robertson to play every week? Pretty much. Obviously not 100%, but pretty much. But Diaz, I'm still not sure. Maybe Carvalho comes in. Maybe Jota is back. So I think Diaz is a very good pick. I think Robertson is a slightly better pick. That's where I am.
Fair. I agree with you. I think Robbo is the better pick for me for now. But
where are you on Nunes? There was a little bit of a bandwagon on Nunes as well after the Community Shield.
Yeah, I really like Darwin. I think if he locks up that starting spot, I think it's still Bobby's place to lose. Just because it's one of those team things where Klopp wants to keep the chemistry and he wants to make every player feel important and sort of Bobby's been a key cognate of that team for a long time. So I don't, I might be wrong here, but I don't see it a easy kind of hey, Darwin, this is your starting spot sort of thing. He has to sort of keep proving himself. So I think there is risk, but at 9.0, he can become a extremely valuable explosive asset. And I can't remember where I heard this, but it's not about comparing a 9.0 Darwin to a 7.0 Robertson. It's about comparing a 9.0 with a 5.0 defender versus a 7.0 Robertson with a cheaper striker, which is
with Baker. Lack. So shout out to above average.
Shout out Baker. So that made perfect sense to me, basically, right? So Darwin's something to think about, but we're gonna be loaded up on 3 Liverpool assets, so it won't be easy to maneuver that move.
Yeah. One other thing on Diaz. So a lot of people sort of think about Diaz as the 8 million price bracket, right? Who they can sort of jump off if something emerges. So I get it. There's a little bit of a price point advantage to Diaz. But my counter to that is if you're going to jump off Diaz and you move to a Mount or a Foden or whoever, you're losing a third Liverpool slot in a fixture run where they're the top of the ticker or the top 5 in the ticker. So yes, you have that flexibility, but you're giving up for that flexibility, the ability to have a third Liverpool constantly throughout this great fixture run. So if you're happy with that, if you're happy with shifting from a Diaz to a Foden, but not owning a Robertson, fair enough. I still think Robertson is better than anyone you switch Diaz to, whether that is Foden, whether that is Mount, whether that is anyone else, frankly, in that price bracket. So yes, bandwagons emerge. Somebody could come in who we're not thinking about right now. So I do get the price point argument. But I don't really see me going against a third Liverpool slot in this fixture.
Yeah, I see above average in the chat. So shout out to you guys, Adam and Baker. But also just a note on the price point thing, Pras. People are so into the price point, and I get why. You need a certain amount of price point, right? You can't go from a 6.0 to an 8.0 easily, but let's say you have an 8.0 midfielder and he starts doing bad. Maybe he drops, maybe he doesn't. And then there's another 8.0 midfielder you want that's starting to emerge and, his price might rise midweek, who knows. Then essentially, if you don't have any money in the bank, it's 2 transfers regardless, isn't it?
It is. And people keep talking about, usual play is you save your free transfer, and then game week 2, you make 2 transfers. Game week 3, you make 2 transfers. So in that case, yeah, you can just move 2 players around. So you can move your Robertson to a Diaz then if you really feel that that's the play. So for example, you can go a Robertson and a Bailey to a Diaz and a 5.0 mid or a defender, sorry. So you could always do that later. And then the other counter argument that I have is a lot of people say, I'm going to play Neco Williams as my 5th defender and have Diaz as my 8.0 price point. Now, the problem with that is, what if the emerging bandwagon isn't the 8.0 midfielder? What if it's a Cucurella or a Doherty? What if it's that 5th defender that you gave up to get to the Diaz? So my issue is we just don't know who the bandwagon is. For us to assume that 8 million has a lot of good players and that could be the bandwagon is probably a fair assumption, but it's not the only assumption that you can have. There can be other bandwagons. What if Mitrovic bangs in a brace against Liverpool? I'll tell you that he'll be double price rising in game week 2. So it's things like that we haven't foreseen, but let's not just assume that 8 million is the only price bracket you need to cover. There are many others and you won't be able to cover all of them.
Yep. Okay. I do have an Arsenal section, but I think we can skip it because Arsenal is we're all.
Let's just discuss some burning questions on Arsenal. So Martinelli, I think we both agree he's a gift. ESR is injured, so you sort of are on him. You'll see my draft. I don't have Martinelli.
Yep.
And that'll be one which I will talk about when I come to my draft because I've gone Saka instead. What do you think on penalties? Is it whoever wins it takes it, or you think Saka has it?
I think I've heard forums where it's kind of wishy-washy, but I think Saka is probably going to take it. Have you read that Jesus might take it as well?
Yes, Jesus. No, I have not heard. He's really bad at them. So I've, obviously because Saka won it, he took it in preseason. And before that, Martinelli had done the same thing. So we don't know. We don't know who's on it. But for me, the geek in me is basically thinking that if whoever is winning it is taking them, then we're losing one fantasy assist from Arsenal's attack every time. Because normally, if Saka is fouled and Jesus takes the penalty, then you get an assist for Saka as well. But in that case, you won't. But apart from that, look, I think most of us are tripling up. I think there is some sense to doing that given their fixtures in the first leg. But my question to you is, have you thought about not committing to the third Arsenal? So I see Ramsdale in a lot of drafts. I have Ramsdale right now, but he's more like a filler. I'm not yet convinced on who the third Arsenal should be because you may want to basically go for a White if you think that, Tomiyasu is not coming back or White is there to stay as the 4.5 and he'll just continue to play on the right, or Saliba if he's looking really good. So that 4.5 defender could unlock more budget in midfield. Or maybe you want triple attack. I mean, they play Bournemouth and Fulham, I think, in game week 3 and game week 4.
Yeah.
You wouldn't mind how they're looking. You wouldn't mind a triple up in their attack. So by committing to a Ramsdale, you're shutting that out. Do you think that has merit, or you think you just back the Arsenal defense?
Yeah, I get it. I think one of the reasons why I'm very hesitant to go to a White is just because there's just so much value in the 5.0s and 5.5 wingbacks that I want to be maximizing those positions. And so, for example, obviously you could do 5 wingbacks, but you could also do 4 and have a Neco Williams in there and save a lot of money there. But I really like the look of Ramsdale. I think Ramsdale is proving to be probably my best keeper option between 4.5 and 5 and even Ederson. I think that he can match or just be right behind Ederson because Ramsdale's fixtures for the first 7-8 is really, really decent. And if you really look into it and sort of assess whether you think it's going to be a clean sheet or not, when you look at the 4.5s, Raya and Sanchez don't give me confidence at all. And the season is one of those seasons where you can pay a little bit more and sort of take the chance and see if you can maximize the first 7 or 8 fixtures before your wild card.
Yeah. Actually, now that you're talking about keepers, I see a lot of excitement because Iverson has come in at 4.0, the Leicester keeper. So now Leicester have 2 4.0 keepers. Yeah. If you started with both, you'd have a Leicester starting keeper for 4.0. But the problem is that there are rumors that they're in talks with Newcastle for Dubravka or Darlow or others. Yeah. So you will get stuck if they buy another keeper who is not Iverson or Ward, and then you sort of have to make a keeper transfer. That's the catch. But I think if you know that Ward is starting game week 1, what I do like is a Ward and a Sanchez rotation. So Sanchez plays Man United game week 1, but Ward plays Brentford. So you start with Ward, and then later if they buy anybody else, doesn't matter. You let Ward sit on your bench. And then you have Sanchez, who has very good fixtures from game week 2 to game week 8, which is, again, going back to the wildcard discussion on if your wildcard window is until game week 8, then Brighton is a very backable team for that fixture run. So my one comment is I'm actually thinking about downgrading Ramsdale to a Sanchez and a Ward combination, and that could kind of help me use that 0.5 somewhere else. So potentially, in my draft, and we'll come to it, a Bailey to a Neto later. So it's something to think about, but please don't fall for the trap of Ward and Iverson. I see that in the chat. You will be stuck once they sign a keeper. If they don't, you get lucky, but if they do, then you're stuck.
Yeah, it's also Leicester with a couple tough fixtures early on. So yeah, you might have saved price points, but how much are you actually you're losing opportunity costs. So I'm not so keen on having two 4.0 keepers.
All right, Man United. I think we don't have to sort of go too long on them. I'm a little bit cold. I've seen people looking at Rashford and Martial. Now, there's a couple of issues. Number one, Ronaldo is not looking to leave anytime soon. So the saga may continue. It may go on till game week 3 or 4. I think there is enough confidence that the game week 1 team will be Rashford on the left, Martial up top, and Sancho on the right. Dalot should be the backable 4.5 defender. So these are the guys who you should be looking at. But I don't have confidence in the team because after game week 1, you never know. Ronaldo starts the next game week for Martial. You don't know if Martial moves to the left or Rashford starts instead. Sancho, there's a risk that he missed the last preseason game because he was ill. For me, I think right now you just wait and watch. They have Liverpool in game week 3. Let them play Liverpool. Let's see how they're coming out of that. They're so cheap that you will be able to get to them. So even if Rashford, goes crazy, his price rises another couple of points, 6.7 million for Rashford would be a steal. So you don't have to you don't have to burn your hands by entering a bandwagon in anticipation. Just jump on it when you get there.
Yeah, I mean, just preseason is the results don't matter in the end, right? It's just seeing it's part of the process. And what I've noticed is Diego Dalot is doing very well. Sanchez looked very well. I know he's ill now, and Martial looks like he's sort of on a revenge tour. But we've seen this revenge tour mode multiple times. So I do agree with you. You have to wait and watch, and maybe Bruno comes into the fold this season. Who knows, right? So.
Yeah, but too early. I mean, the most recent reports are we're not even signing Frankie de Jong, which is not great. And the other reports are that they're looking at Neves instead. So there's implications there. If we sign Neves, then who's going to be on penalties at Wolves?
Yep.
Could be Neto. So that has sort of ripple effects on Neto becoming more appealing. But for Man United, I think that's all we had to say.
Awesome.
Who did we leave out? Top 6. I think Chelsea,
City.
We discussed a little bit with James. I think Chilwell is a no-touch right now, given his preseason minutes. What do you think of Mount and Sterling for Chelsea?
Yeah, good. I don't think Sterling is viable yet. He's just too expensive. He's the premium price tag, and obviously great player, but we don't really know what to expect with Chelsea, and a little bit of Chelsea camp being not great this preseason, but he might come out and do well. But once he does well, then you can hop on him because he's too expensive to have straight off the bat, unless you're willing to gamble. But I think Mount is such a safe pick, very under the radar type of pick. And last season he was, tagging along with the points. And I think in the preseason game, I can't remember which game it was, I was sort of watching for Mount's positioning. And he's involved, but he's not the final pass to the goal type of, he obviously has assists in him, but a lot of times he was sort of the pass to assist type of playmaker. I think he was dropping a little deeper. So I'm not so keen on Mount straight off the bat, but if you go for him, I can see why.
He's going to be a steady Eddie. So in fact, if I was talking to Late Riser, he shared his latest draft today where he has Sterling and he has Doherty, no Robertson.
Oh, wow.
So basically, what he's done is in the template, you have Robertson and Mount. He's gone Robertson down to Doherty and Mount up to Sterling. So it's basically like, your steady Eddie, Mount and Robertson. If you put them on steroids, they become Doherty and Sterling. So that's basically what those are. And I don't hate it because Sterling has two advantages. One, he's playing number 9. They have a fluid system, but he was the furthest forward alongside Havertz and Mount. Number two, it's a nice awkward price point, but it also concentrates your funds towards one position. So if later, for example, he doesn't have a Robertson, he wants to move to a Nunes, he can do that very quickly. Or if he wants to look at another, a Bowen after game week 1, after he plays Man City, has a good run, you have that funds in one place. And it's not really that bad like a freemium where it restricts your rest of the team. All he's doing is basically downgrading a Robertson. So I would have a lot of panic attacks if I did it, but I can see why some managers like Late Riser, other people who are more maverick than me, and I'm not afraid to admit that. If they do that, I don't think it's a bad shout at all. I don't particularly love the Mount shout. I know his underlying data is good and all, but I'm happy to wait for him after Spurs in game week 2 and then see if I want to jump on him. And I also struggle to see how you can have a Mount in your team and not James, because for me, even if if you get a James playing right wing back, I back him to score more points than Mount. If he's playing centre back, fine, Mount is better.
Yeah, and
So yeah,
just a note on the Sterling is that if you think about Chelsea, they have great runners, right? They have Havertz, Pulisic. I'm forgetting right now. Great runners, right?
Mount,
People,
Ziyech.
people who can run and sort of receive the ball, but they don't really have a sort of direct type of attacker. Maybe Ziyech is the one that can get get past a defender, but he's too slow, right? So Sterling is sort of like the perfect signing for Chelsea on that left side, and it's going to be a key attacking pattern for Chelsea. He's the one that can and get across a defender, and wow, I'm struggling with my words here, but I think he's one to watch and very exciting to watch.
And if they sign Frankie, it would break my heart, obviously, and Man United fans' hearts. But there is talk that they're looking at Frankie de Jong, and he would sort of also add another engine to sort of unleash the runners. And I think Sterling would benefit a lot. So it's a decent one. It won't be in the template, but it's one that you can back. But there's so many good players that even if you go off template, there's not a lot of terrible picks, and I think Sterling is a good pick as well.
Yep. Okay. Quickly, should we do what Haaland does to City, or should we just move to the teams?
I think on City right now, it's pretty clear cut, right? I mean, it's either Haaland or Kane, so or maybe nobody. What we saw in the Community Shield is people were backing Grealish and Mahrez as the two starters because they had the most preseason minutes. But when Foden came on, he looked amazing. When Alvarez came on, he looked
Foden
amazing.
was the best player in City.
So that has sort of thrown the whole thing out of whack in terms of who would be the starter, because it could be Foden on the left, Alvarez on the right. It could be Grealish on the left, Foden on the right, Mahrez on the right, Foden on the left. It could be any combination, or even Alvarez starting. I don't know. So that has sort of thrown out all the mids. But there is an opportunity if you had only two Man City slots and you had an 8 million slot like a Mount or a Saka that you'll see with my draft, that you could sort of say, okay, Bournemouth game week 2, I like Foden again, and Foden is looking good, and he should be the guy who gets another start because Pep rewards good players if they're playing well. You can jump on that. So I think game week 1, there's no Man City mid that I would say you get on. And you sort of decide between Haaland and Kane separately as a separate discussion. That's not a City discussion. That's a strategy discussion, which we will have. And then Walker. What do you think about Walker?
No, I'm not so keen on Walker. I think he's good. I think he's probably a better asset than maybe even Laporte when he returns. But Laporte has those bullet headers because he's essentially used to be a true right back, right? And now he's playing that RCB type of role. But yeah, I think he's okay. 5.0. You can probably slot it in, get a couple clean sheets, maybe the occasional, long ball shot that he has in his arsenal, but he doesn't, get you many attacking returns, so I wouldn't be too.
But you don't need it. I mean, if you look at the first 8 game weeks, Man City are here for expected clean sheets or expected points for defenders. Then it's Liverpool after one tier. Then there's a drop to, I think, Arsenal, who are third. So you are basically backing Man City to get 5 or 6 clean sheets in the first 8 game weeks. And that's not bad for a 5 million defender. Now, the issue with Walker is they're still quite aggressively looking at a left back. and they want a left-sided player or a left-footed defender. So Cucurella is looking like he's out of reach, but they're still looking at others. So you end up going for a Walker and they sign somebody else.
All right.
It's a little bit of a risk.
I have a burning question. Would you go Walker or Trippier?
For now, I would go Trippier for sure, because Trippier has the better first two fixtures. But after game week 2, so in game week 3, I'm open to going for a Walker if I see that Man City is making no progress on a left back. But he will be competing against all these other interesting 5 million options.
Okay, fair. Okay, yeah, and on Haaland, I think Haaland's going to be excellent, and I think that Community Shield game was a good sign for him. But how do you feel about Haaland?
I have Haaland in my team. I liked what I saw. Of course, City were not sort of looking for his runs. They're not used to it, playing with a number 9 who's making runs. They're used to sort of passing the ball and having somebody just run into the goal and doing a tap in. They're not used to that, but they will get there. I mean, people are backing a Conte manager to get it right with Perisic and Son and whatever. You need to back a Pep to get it right with Haaland and KDB and how they play around him. So I'm completely bullish on Haaland. I think there's a little bit of game theory here. Now, if we're here, before we get to our drafts, why don't we discuss it? So This is a big issue. People are thinking last minute we're going to leave it to Kane or Haaland. For me, it's pretty clear. Either you go for Kane and you stick with Kane. Yep. So you keep Kane for Southampton at home, you keep him for the Chelsea game, and then you get out of him the Wolves and the Nottingham Forest games. Or you go for a Haaland and you keep him regardless of a blank. If he blanks against West Ham, you keep him for Bournemouth at home, and then you switch him out to a Kane if you don't like what you see. This approach of people sort of booking in a transfer, for me, that doesn't sit really right, because let's play game theory, right? You have Kane, and there's 4 scenarios. Kane has blanked, Haaland has scored. Kane has scored, Haaland has blanked. Each have scored or each have blanked. So let's talk about each scenario. If both have scored, you were looking to switch. Will you switch? I don't know. You will sort of waver because Kane has scored against Southampton, but then you're thinking Haaland has also scored against West Ham. You probably will still switch if you're inclined to.
Yeah.
If Kane has scored and Haaland has blanked, would you switch?
No.
Well,
then it'd be tough. You would. It'd be very tough because he's going to be highly captained in game week 2. Yeah.
Correct. So you will waver, right? You will not be sure if you should switch or not. So the advantage you had of going Kane over Haaland was the Southampton game. You got that advantage, but now you're not willing to make the move for the advantage that Haaland has over Kane, which is playing Bournemouth at home instead of Kane playing Chelsea away. So for me, you're going to be stuck in this dilemma. And to add to the mix, first Kane plays on Saturday, Haaland plays on Monday. So now let's get to the scenario where both blank. So if Kane has blanked, some people will start making the move to Haaland on a Sunday because Kane has already played. Now, I'm not talking about engaged managers. Now imagine the scenario where Kane is dropping in price before Haaland has even played on a Monday. Will you switch before Haaland has even played game week 1? So these are the things that I'm sort of going through in my head, which is why I'm trying to make the case that if you're going for Kane, have conviction to keep Kane. If you're going for Haaland, keep him until the 2 game weeks. Do not get into this mindset of I'm going to switch, because in any scenario, you will either be tempted or you will end up doing it anyway. And if you're in that camp, just go for Haaland. And that's where I am. I know in all these 4 scenarios, even if Kane scores and Haaland blanks, I will switch from Kane to Haaland. So then in that case, I'm going to just go for Haaland now and hope for a little bit of variance in game week 1 where Haaland could still do well against West Ham. Maybe not as well as Kane, but if you're not captaining Kane, what advantage are you gaining over me, who went Haaland and I got a blank and you got a goal?
Yeah.
That's not a lot because you're not really captaining. Not a lot of people I've seen are captaining Kane home to Southampton. They're captaining Salah.
Yeah, and on that note, not captaining Salah in that first game is a scary feeling. I mean, he looked so good, and just beast mode Salah back in preseason.
So that's my thing. I am going for Haaland because nothing more than the reason that I want Haaland Bournemouth home. And the advantage I have is if Haaland scores against West Ham, I'm captaining Haaland against home to Bournemouth. And people who've gone Kane will basically look at that and be forced into moving to Haaland. Whereas I will have this advantage that I will, if I don't like what I see, I'll switch to Kane later in game week 3 anyway. So I'm not saying that's the right play. All I'm saying is if you have conviction on Kane, keep it.
How about this scenario where it's a 2 m, not a 3 m, and you ignore Kane and Haaland, and you go for a possibly Son or KDB, right? Because you could make that move, or not make that move in the same scenario as Haaland and Kane. Do one of those guys excite you at all?
They do. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Son or a KDB. Usually, Son gets all less love than Kane. Always happens, and Son has to do a lot more to convince people. Even though he used to be cheaper this year, he's more expensive. So there's slightly more logic. So going back to the James chat with on the wire yesterday, James said, "Look, Kane will score more goals, but Son will score more FPL points." That was the summary, which is not unfair. Because Son does get clean sheet points. He does get 1 extra point for a goal, countered by Kane's penalties. But Kane is just a little bit cheaper. And, Haaland is such an explosive option that people are going for Kane as a route to Haaland. And they're afraid that what happens if Haaland scores a hat-trick against West Ham. So that's sort of why I can see why people are going more Kane than a Son to start off with.
Yeah, as A+ mentions, I'm asking for a friend. Because
yes, you can go Son, man. You can go Son.
I started both of the last 2 seasons with Son, and it sucks that I'm even debating this, right? Like, because
I've already shown you a route to get Son, man. So wait for your game week 8 window. Look, there's nothing wrong with going for. I already showed a game week 3 wildcard window where you could go for a Son and a Kane, or a Son and a Haaland and a Salah draft. You could do that. And that could be one route. But look, let's close out this Haaland versus Kane discussion. So like in the chat says, the question is, will Kane outscore Haaland by more than 4 points? And he's saying that because you will spend 4 points on the transfer. But I think it's more complicated than that. If Kane outscores Haaland by 4 points, but if Haaland has got 1 goal and Kane has got 2 goals, I think you will still want to make the switch. Or in certain cases, if Kane has only got 1 goal, which is a penalty, you will maybe hesitate to doing that. The other point is, what is the value of a free transfer? For me, I pretty much always save my free transfer after game week 1, so that in game week 2, once I've had 2 game weeks of data, information, eye test, I will then make a mini wildcard of 2 or 3 transfers, so potentially a -4, change it around. Maybe I don't see what I was thinking about Arsenal that I thought initially. Maybe Chelsea are still amazing in defense and we were being all, naive, ignoring their defenders. So I don't want to lose that value and be taking a -8 in game week 2 just because I had a Kane to Haaland switch in my mind. Some people are more hits averse, so fair play to them. But I feel like a difference between a -4 and a -8 is more than just a 4 points. That it's a psychological change as well.
If you go with Kane in game week 1, you should commit to captaining him. Would you agree, Pras?
Not necessarily. You have to captain the player you think will score the most goals. And if you think Salah Salah has got an insane record against promoted teams in game week 1. So why would you back against him? What I'm talking about is commitment to hold him beyond game week 2. I don't think you have to commit to captain him. But yeah, because there is less commitment to captain him, I'm using that to my advantage as a Haaland owner to say, what is my damage if Kane scores and Haaland doesn't score in game week 1?
Yep. Okay. Let's go to the drafts.
Sure.
Okay. We basically have very similar drafts, so it's kind of a little bit of a, I guess, variance in the draft, or a little difference in the draft is very minimal. One has James, one doesn't. This is a very template draft. I think that a lot of people with the 5 at the back will sort of go for this draft. Obviously, if you look here, there's Neto as well as Bailey, and you could.
You want to read out the full team?
Oh, right. For the podcast listeners, by the way, guys, please do subscribe to the FF Scout YouTube channel. It really helps.
As is in the chat as well.
As is in the chat. So I noticed that I forgot all videos. So please, for burning questions, do subscribe and hit the like button if you can. For our podcast listeners, we have for this is the first draft. We have Ramsdale in goal, five at the back: Trent, Robertson, Cancelo, James, and Perisic. In the midfield, we have three of Salah, Martinelli, and Bailey. And then up top, we have Jesus and Haaland. And in the bench, we have Ward, Neto, Andreas Pereira, and Archer. So 0.0. And obviously, the question mark here is, what do you do with that kind of iffy money between Bailey and Neto? Because there's no real upgrade in price point from 0.51. So, yeah. What do you think about this?
This is going to be the most template five at the back, because this gives you the elite backline, because I don't think the backline gets better than this. If Chilwell was fit, then maybe you could argue that Chilwell could come in here. But other than that, these are the top five defenders that money could buy at the moment. And you have a Ramsdale who looks solid as an Arsenal defense cover amongst these guys. So your defense is that's the starting point. Then you have two premiums, which is, again, a great starting point. You have Martinelli, who's looking to kind of break the game at 6 million, the best option at that price point. There's absolutely nothing to hate about this draft. The only issue is what people talk about is now if Foden scores a brace against West Ham and you really want Foden at home to Bournemouth, you cannot get to him, or you'll have to take a hit in game week 2. The counterpoint is if Doherty scores a brace in game week 1, fine, he plays Chelsea. Let me use another example. Trippier scores a brace against Nottingham Forest in game week 1. You want to get to him, you will easily go Perisic down to him. If, for example, Perisic doesn't appeal, or James down to him, you have that. You can do that in one transfer, which some other people with 4 at the back or 3 at the back cannot. So you have limited flexibility in midfield, but you have additional flexibility in your defense. My issue with this is you're sort of wasting funds. You've got Neto as first bench. You're not playing Neto in game week 1. Game week 2, I don't know. Will you play Neto in game week 2?
No, because Bailey might go off, and he has a decent fixture as well. So I actually prefer Bailey over Neto at this point in time. And it's
you've got Neto as a safety blanket in case Bailey becomes what we are all afraid of him becoming, which is a 55-minute cameo, and he looks rubbish and then he never plays again. So that could happen to Bailey. So you've got Neto as an insurance. If that happens, then you will do that. But my question is, why not just keep 0.5 or 1 million in the bank and just downgrade that Neto position? And then if Bailey becomes a dud, then you upgrade Bailey then. Of course, it's using up a transfer. But if you're going Haaland instead of Kane, that gives you that luxury. You have not booked in a transfer. You can think about these things later on. The other thing I will say about Neto, so as I was talking about, game week 1, you won't play him. Game week 2, you won't play him. Game week 3, he plays Spurs. So why do you have him?
Yeah.
So this was the dilemma that I had, that this draft was my starting point as well yesterday. Yeah. And then I said, I don't need this 1 million from Bailey.
I don't
then I went, from Neto. I'm happy to start with Bailey. Then I went, if I can get another 1 million out of James, if I downgrade a James to a Trippier, a 5 million defender, could be Dean, Cash, or anyone, or a Walker. I've got 2 million now floating around in this draft. I will upgrade Martinelli to a Saka. And suddenly now I have an 8 million price point. So now we don't even need to flip to my draft, but that's basically my draft. And that's the thinking. The only advantage of that is I'm not wasting the Neto spot. I'm not using up, I'm not wasting any money as a side, like, for example, what we're benching. I'm happy with Andreas Pereira. The flaw, obviously, is that I don't have Martinelli, who could be a game breaker. His price could jump if he does well in the first 2 game weeks, because after that, as I said, they play Fulham and Nottingham Forest. So that's where we are.
Yeah. I'm happy with my draft, but I'm also not fully happy with it. So I think a lot of also one thing is that you sort of don't want to leave this till the last minute, especially the last day, the last couple hours, because I think one thing I learned last season is that when you leave it that late, you should have some contingency plans maybe, or really think through your team early in the week and especially this week before everything gets started. Sort of really finalize what you think you're going to go probably by tomorrow, right? And and sort of think with your head, and then once crunch time comes, once the I guess press conferences come, maybe you can maneuver a little bit, but yeah, I might switch it around completely,
You'll be panicking last day. Don't kid yourself. Look, the thing is, we think that we're tweaking around a lot of things, but ultimately we've got, I would say 11
Yeah.
players sorted. So what you're doing is, if I look at your draft, your goalkeeper, your James spot, and maybe even not that, your Neto and your Bailey spot, and maybe Martinelli, 5. Those are the spots you're playing around with. I don't think you're going to change a Haaland, or you could change him to Kane, but it doesn't change the structure. You're not going to change Jesus. You're not going to change the 4 defenders that you've got here. So you're pretty settled. So this is more settled than you would think you think you are. And now you take a call. If Cucurella has signed for Chelsea, and Everton look completely out of it, then I'm not going against James. I'm going to get him. So these are small things that you will pick up with press conferences. If Pep is saying, we don't need to sign a left back, we're happy with who we have, we've got these guys coming out from the youth team and whatever, go for Walker. I mean, he would be a great choice if they're not going to sign another left back. So press conferences still remain really, really key, but those are only changing the fine margins in your team. If you've already made the big decisions on 2 premiums versus 3 premiums, Salah, no Salah, Haaland versus Kane, then all of that is just periphery.
Yep. I do have a Son draft, and I'm not shutting it down. I'm still keen on it. So we'll see where we
in
end up.
your draft, you've got Neto money lying around. Switch Neto to even a Dewsbury Hall, which, by the way, a lot of people who are afraid of going Bailey, Dewsbury Hall is a beautiful outlet. If Bailey doesn't work out, you don't have to have a Neto sitting on the bench. You just change Bailey to a Dewsbury Hall. So in your draft, you've got 1 million spare. You could turn Haaland to a Son and still have 0.5 spare. Sorry, Haaland to a Son.
Yeah. It's for me. It's between Haaland and Son. It's not actually Haaland and Kane anymore. I had Kane just a couple days ago, but you're right. If I'm gonna go for Kane, it doesn't make sense. I'm just gonna go for Haaland and keep him, because 2 to 6 Man City are just amazing fixtures. There's no need to make that extra -4 move. But I don't mind my Son draft. It really it's maximizing my 11. It's just I'm lacking that Haaland and Man City second asset, and there's no one to go for besides Haaland. So that's why I'm
same logic. If you're going for Son and Salah draft, stick it out. Don't change Son to Haaland game week 2. Stay with Son. That would be my thing. And there's a couple of questions on the draft. So I see in the chat, Steven is asking on the bench fodders. So his question is, who's your striker on the bench? The 4.5?
I think it was
so
Archer.
I've got the Crystal Palace guy, and my thinking there is basically, obviously Greenwood will get the most minutes, but he's also the most owned. And then Archer, I don't think, as soon as these guys moved away from the diamond, so they Villa used to play the diamond and then 2 strikers, Ings and Watkins. Now they've moved to a 4-3-3 or a Christmas tree. In this case, they're not going to play Archer. Ings will come on as the first sub. So Archer may get minutes, but not at all. As well in some games. So I would just gone for the lowest own, because I don't think I'll reach third bench with 5 subs at all in the first 8 game weeks.
Yep. Let me show you my Son draft real quick.
Go on then.
If I can find it.
Okay. Until then, while you're looking for it, I'm going to answer some questions in the chat. What about Almiron? Please don't go there. 5 million is a good price, but look, they're looking to sign a lot of players. And then he plays Man City in game week 3. It's just, much better to go Bailey. Maybe he nails down a spot, or Dewsbury Hall. I see. Is having Son, Salah, and Haaland too much? Question from Simon. So that's a freemium question. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with freemium. There were 2 issues with freemium that I had initially, which were that you were going to sacrifice an 8 million mid spot, and you were going to sacrifice a 4th premium defender. Yeah. I think now that Chilwell isn't in the game anymore, or at least not in game week 1, you could look at going for more 5 million defenders. You could look for no 8 million midfielder and potentially squeeze one in. But when you do that, always compare, can I go Son plus, or let me say, can I go Kane plus a 5 million defender versus a Jesus plus a Saka? And I think that's where always people come back with, if you're not captaining them, might as well go for the mid-price mids.
Yeah. So, Pras, I have the Sun draft here. You could do Sun to KDB in case things go wrong, and because as we talked about, Sun is the very expensive player. You could just downgrade him easily and upgrade one of I guess Greenwood or Archer up to Haaland as well. So there it is 2 transfers. You can do it, but yeah.
If you're going for Son, you pick him for Nottingham Forest and for Wolves at home and for Southampton at home.
Yeah.
Don't try to do hokey cokey. You won't be able to do it because you'll have other problems. Other things will come up. The transfer window is still open. That would be my recommendation. I think Az is on a Son and Haaland draft as well. Sorry, Son and Salah draft. I've not seen it,
Is
but
he?
I
Nice.
gather from some of the things he's been saying. But nothing wrong with it at all. As long as you're backing the Son pick and not panicking on Haaland if he scores a goal against West Ham. I know I won't be able to. I will panic. So that's why I'm going with Haaland in the first place, and then I'll change if I see something different. Last question, I think let's take from Vial, who's asking for best pick at 8 million. So what's your ranking for the 8 million midfielders?
I don't really have a ranking, but maybe Diaz or Saka would be first choice.
Saka for me would be first. Now that you have the threat from Jota and the Nunes X minutes looking better, I think Saka has gone number 1. But the problem is you have Martinelli. With Diaz, we've discussed him. The problem is Robertson. Number 3 would be Mount,
yeah.
Or Foden. Foden maybe. Foden, depending on how he looks against West Ham. But Foden would be number 3. Mount would be number 4. Kulusevski number 5. I guess that's where we are.
Yeah. Kulu's
but all these guys have an alternative.
Yeah, they all have problems. Yeah. Kulusevski, we just don't know how. Richarlison is no joke, right? He's Everton's best player, so.
Look, I think Conte has said enough that he thinks Kulu, Son and Kane are the top 3. But yes, they will come on. There is a theory, there's a pro Kulusevski theory, which is to say that if the game is easy and it's 1, then it's Son who will come out for Richarlison.
Yeah.
If the game is tough and they're still kind of grinding, then Kulusevski will come off for Richarlison and Son will stay. Or maybe they're chasing the game. So see, if in the easy games he's getting more minutes, that may not be that bad. But yeah, he's not the top of my list.
Yeah, but even then, it's Son's still getting probably like 75, 80 minutes at the least. So,
the 8 million bracket in my draft. So if I was more maverick and if I feel it, that's where you can sort of make your gains. You can start with a Kulusevski because he plays Southampton at home and Richarlison is suspended. You move to a Foden for home to Bournemouth, and then you move to a Saka for the long term for the Arsenal assets, because Arsenal's first 2 fixtures are not the easiest. We're talking about their easy run, but away to Crystal Palace, home to Leicester are fine, but they're not that plumb. Crystal Palace away is a tough game. Leicester home, you can argue, is a easier one now that they've lost their keeper and they're also having defensive issues. Pereira's injured. So you could argue that could be all right, but that could be a strategy as well.
Yeah. Just to summarize the 8.0s, I think no. What am I thinking? No doubt, Saka is the best option. I have so many good memories
in isolation. But if Martinelli didn't exist, then if Jesus didn't sign, Saka would be 50% plus owned.
But with that being said, the guy that I would really want is probably Foden. Just so exciting as a pick, and at any point,
especially for game week 2. Because Parker has been complaining about the signings and they haven't got anybody. That's basically gives you all the signs that they are the team to back, and this is to target. This is why Bailey is popular. He plays Bournemouth game week 1. You can sort of, in your draft, you can sort of make a plan for target Bournemouth, because Bailey plays Bournemouth first, then you have Haaland playing Bournemouth second, then you have, I think, Liverpool playing Bournemouth third, then you have Neto playing Bournemouth fourth. So you have almost like a plan for, I have an attacker who plays a Bournemouth team in the first 4-5 game weeks.
And Simon says Madison disrespect. I rate Madison super highly. It's just transfer rumors right now, so we have to wait and watch.
So what you go for a Madison game week 1, he's not in the lineup. Rumors start flying in that a bid has been made for Madison. Game week 2 he misses because he's having his medical. The first game we get out of Madison is game week 3 away to Man City. That's why he's not in the list. Of course, if he stays, he's a good pick.
Okay, hour 40. Wow, that was too long. Sorry, guys. We'll keep it under 20 minutes as we first said.
No way. No, look, I think going forward, the first 4-5 game weeks, we're not going to do a deep dive on stats. This is what we've been known to do in the second half of the season. We're going to do a deep dive on what we're seeing, what is changing from our observations that we went in with in game week 1. And those hopefully should be shorter, more to the point. So we'll try to talk about the teams. What are we seeing? What is different? So yeah, it won't be an hour and 40 minutes going forward, at least for the next few game weeks.
Okay, one last time, guys. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also do sign up for FF Scout membership. You can get a discount through either Pras or my ID. So it'd be great to have more members this year for Fantasy Football Scout. It's been a very nervous and also fun episode coming back. I do mean it. I was actually quite nervous today, but once we'll do a couple more episodes, I'm sure we'll be back in full flow, and we'll do sort of a catch up next week with after game week 1, see how it goes. I'll probably do a team reveal soon on Twitter or something, and let's get it going, Pras.
Yep. Good luck, everyone. We've got 48 hours to go, a little bit more. But also shout out to Fest. I will be at the Fest if anyone is coming in London. It's on Friday, 4 p.m. So yeah, come and say hello if you're there.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.